Is your HOA always this fair? The gate creaked as Grandpa's Buick was lifted before the church bells even stopped ringing. The president slapped a paper on my windshield filed February 12-07, calling it a community rule. She didn't answer when I asked why the fine smelled like ink instead of law. Under the porch light, I flipped that notice while a paper stamp echoed. Hayes, the banker, read the same code from his loan ledger, and the red tape glow turned real. Next week, the clubhouse lights stayed off, every account frozen, every apology signed. They lifted Grandpa's Buick before the first hymn. The sound of the tow truck's winch cut through the quiet Sunday morning like a cough in prayer. The steel cable shuddered, groaned, and bit into the bumper as the chrome ornament caught the sun. I was halfway across the lot, coffee steaming through the lid. "Hey, what's the code?" The driver didn't look at me. "Orders on the glass. Filed 0742, Section 1207. His gloved hands moved, steady, practiced. Grandpa leaned on his cane eyes full of disbelief. "We've parked here every Sunday for 40 years. From the church steps, HOA President Margaret adjusted her cardigan, her voice even and rehearsed. "Community rules apply equally. Dan, access lanes must remain open." I pointed to the bright boundary pin hammered clean into the asphalt last spring. "That's not an access lane, that's the lot line. You can still see the paint." "Bylaws changed last quarter," she said. "It's in the notice board by the gate." The crowd gathering near the church doors pretended not to stare. Steam drifted from the diner window across the street, and the bell above the door rang once, soft but sharp enough to cut the silence. I pressed my palm flat against the windshield, reading the paper pinned beneath the wiper tow notice. Filed 0742. Chartoine-2-07. The ink hadn't dried yet. Grandpa murmured, "She's doing this because I spoke up about the new fees. Maybe," I said, pulling out my phone to snap a photo, "but I'm making sure it's recorded." Margaret stepped closer, her heels crisp against the gravel. "You can appeal through proper channels. For now, the car's being relocated. To where I asked." "To compliance storage," she said as though the words were printed on a commandment tablet. I lifted my phone higher. "Section 1207 isn't a parking ordinance, it's a bank reference. I've seen it before." Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes twitched. The driver hesitated, glancing between us. "Ma'am, you sure this is HOA authority paper says filed, not approved? Proceed," she ordered. The church bell tolled again, slower this time. Grandpa's hands trembled against the cane, his voice dry. "All I wanted was to sit through service." I nodded, jaw tight. "And I'll make sure you do." The tow truck's winch whined. I knelt to photograph the chain angle, the boundary pin still marking where the lot ended. Behind me, Deacon Harris stepped forward, his face pale. "Margaret," he said gently. "This seems excessive. It's Sunday. It's policy," she replied, though her tone cracked. Grandpa looked at me. "You know that code, don't you?" "Yeah," I said. "It's not from the township. It's from their bank paperwork." He drew a long breath. "Then you hold them to it." I turned to the driver. "You move that car, you'll be tied to their loan dispute." The man froze mid-motion. Margaret's glare could have cut glass. "Dan, she said you're making this harder than it needs to be." "Harder?" I stepped closer. "You used a financial clause to seize church parking. That's fraud, not governance." The bell over the diner door rang again, our silent beat. Heads turned from across the street. People left their coffee cups on the counter, watching through the glass. "Lower it," the driver said quietly. Margaret spun. "You take my direction, not his." The driver tapped the clipboard. "Ma'am, this signature line's blank." Her face drained of color. Grandpa steadied himself, shoulders lifting just enough to reclaim his dignity. "All this," he said, voice rough over a parking spot. "It's not about parking," I said. "It's about control." He nodded. "Then make them read their own paper." Margaret reached for the tow slip, but I stepped between her and the truck. "You filed this under Section 1207, I said. "That section belongs to your bank loan covenant. You just turned a parking violation into a credit event." The whisper moved through the crowd like a fuse catching flame. "Is that true?" someone asked. "Can they even do that?" Her lips parted, but no answer came. Deacon Harris folded his arms. "I think this belongs at the county office, not in front of the choir." The driver sighed, pressing the release. The winch loosened the Buick, settling back onto solid ground. The sound of metal resting was louder than the church bell itself. Grandpa touched my shoulder. "That's enough," he whispered. "Not yet," I said, folding the slip and tucking it into my jacket. "This notice is evidence." Margaret stepped backward, breath shallow. "You'll regret crossing the board." "I don't answer to the board," I said. "I answer to the record." The diner bell rang again, and the morning light caught the boundary pin at our feet. The crowd shifted, murmuring under its breath. Grandpa smiled faintly. "You think this'll end today?" "No," I said. "But it started right." He nodded, proud but tired. The tow truck pulled away without another word. Margaret turned toward her SUV, her silhouette sharp against the church's white siding. I watched her go, then looked back at Grandpa's Buick streaked with dust but standing free. "Freedom isn't loud," I said quietly, watching the reflection of the church steeple in the hood's curve. "It's notarized." The diner bell chimed a final time, sealing the moment like a stamp on paper. The diner headline waited for me before the coffee-cooled parking crackdown near Church County. Log 12-07. Someone had circled the number in red pen and left it on the counter beside the sugar packets. I slid the paper closer. "You print this here?" The waitress shook her head. "Came off the HOA bulletin. Margaret faxed it over after service." Grandpa stirred his cup. "They make rules faster than sermons these days." Steam curled between us, hanging like unspoken judgment. The small TV above the pie case played the county weather muted, but the scrolling ticker repeated the same digits. 812-07. I unfolded the slip I'd taken from his windshield and laid it flat beside the paper. The same code, same timestamp. But the signature different ink, a heavier stroke. The waitress leaned over. "You looking to make trouble?" "Not trouble," I said. "Proof." She poured another refill, the bell on the pot clinking against the rim. "Pressure isn't law, honey. It just looks like it when it's printed neat." At the post office, the morning line smelled of rain and copier ink. The clerk, a gray-haired man with glasses low on his nose, slid my certified copy across the counter. "Need a timestamp for a complaint?" he asked. "Tow order," I said. "Filed under Section 1207. You ever see that come through here?" He frowned, typing slowly. "That number's not zoning. It's finance." "Bank loan." He glanced around, lowering his voice. "Ask Hayes at the bank why that number matters." The stamp machine thunked once the red ink, shining like a warning light, received 0912. I folded the document and slipped it into my folder beside the diner clipping. Outside, the wind pushed flyers against the post window, HOA meeting. Fiscal review. Margaret's name printed bold at the bottom. Grandpa waited on the bench, his hat tilted low. "Find anything." "Too much," I said. "And not enough yet." He smiled faintly. "That's how truth starts." The walk to the bulletin board felt longer than the street. My boots scuffed old chalk lines where kids used to mark hopscotch squares. The board stood near the gate, cork faded and edges curling. Notices layered like leaves, paint color approvals, trash days, new fines. At the center, stapled over a previous memo, the official violation order. 812-07. The paper had two signatures. The first, Margaret's. The second, barely legible, more flourish than name. I took a photo. A shadow moved beside me. "You know that's for board eyes only," said Carl, one of the quieter members. "Then maybe the board should sign their own names." He adjusted his ball cap, voice low. "Look, Dan, the tow wasn't personal. We needed compliance numbers for the renewal." "Renewal of what?" "The line of credit," he said. "Same clause, 1207, ties the loan to enforcement activity. So you prove you're strict and the bank extends your loan." He winced. "Don't quote me." "Too late," I said, raising my phone recorder. He sighed. "You'll make enemies fast." I pocketed the phone. Enemies make mistakes faster. At home, I spread the papers across the workbench in my garage, the same table where I used to rebuild engines. The fluorescent light hummed overhead, steady as breath. Tow notice. Filed 0742. County log 01207. Posted 0800. Meeting minutes signed 0931. 3 documents one morning, but the order was wrong. The meeting that approved the tow happened after the tow had already occurred. Grandpa's voice echoed from the porch. "Coffee's getting cold again. I'm checking signatures." He walked in, eyes tracing the papers. They backdated the minutes. "Looks that way." He chuckled dryly. "Guess Margaret forgot God reads timestamps too." I looked closer. Margaret's pen line stopped mid-curve, overlapping another stroke, the unknown signer. Carl's words returned like static. We needed compliance numbers. The fluorescent light flickered once, then steadied. My breath felt heavy against the paper. That afternoon, I returned to the bulletin board. Margaret was there, restapling a new notice over the old. "Didn't like the ink," I asked. She turned. "Just updating clarity. We serve the community, Dan." I held up the photo on my phone. "Then explain why the approval signature came after the tow. Same date, wrong hour." Her jaw clenched. "You're reading it wrong." "I read blueprints for a living," I said. "Dates are structure." Behind her, a few neighbors pretended to check mail. The breeze caught the corner of the notice, lifting it like a loose truth. Margaret lowered her voice. "You want to be part of this community sign for the community. Otherwise, you'll stand alone." I smiled, steady. "Then I'll stand with the record." She walked away, heels crunching on gravel. I watched the paper flap once, then, still against the board, the ink of Atato 1207, dark as a bruise. The bank vault gave a low electrical hum that I felt in my jaw. Hayes met me at the side door, tie, loosened sleeves rolled once. He carried a folder stamped in red. Received 0317. The ink looked fresh enough to smear. "Morning," he said. "You brought the tow slip." I set it on his desk under the green lamp. The brass chain clinked against the wood. Filed 0742, Section 1207. Everyone keeps saying it is parking law. He flipped the slip with 2 fingers. "It is not parking law, it is collateral language. So, I'm not crazy." "You are early," he said, almost smiling. "Come on, I want to thread something." He led me past the teller line to a back room that smelled like paper and machine oil. The projector clicked on. Light washed the wall. Hayes eased a spool of microfilm into its track and turned the dial until pages sharpened into columns and diagrams. The sound of the transport wheel was steady, a sewing machine at prayer. "This is the loan package for Margaret's board," he said. "Refinance from last fall. Your section appears on the covenant schedule." Lines of code and footnotes glowed on the glass. He tapped a line with a capped pen. "Here. 4012 to 07. Collateral performance metric. It ties the line of credit to enforcement activity in designated common areas. It is a very unlovely clause. So, towing before church improves their performance score." "On paper," he said, "but there are rules for how they claim it. Minutes have to precede action. Notices must be genuine, not backfilled. Evidence must serve an audit." He turned another knob. A plat overlay slid into focus, the lot lines tracing the church boundary like thread through cloth. He placed a transparent sheet on top, inked with an arrow from the HOA's parcel to a box labeled Bank Covenant Pool. I leaned closer. "You are telling me our lot becomes a talking point in their loan." "Only if the board treats it as governed space," he said. "And only if they do it lawfully." He glanced at my phone on the desk. "You have timestamps tow slip at 0742. County log posted 0800. Meeting minutes at 0931. Wrong order." He nodded, slow and clinical. "Then their claim is non-compliant. If those documents are read into a public record, I can freeze the draw. The covenant allows a hold for probable breach." I exhaled. "Read into record means what exactly?" "Not gossip," he said. Minutes, notices, logs, and signatures presented at a hearing entered by the clerk or acknowledged in a certified transcript. The projector fan deepened for a beat. Hayes changed reels. A ledger frame filled the screen columns tidy as pews. He traced a line with a steel ruler. "Here is the penalty ladder," he said. "First rung is warning. Second is interest bump. Third is administrative freeze. That is the one that gets attention. Freeze means no more money. Freeze means no more money," he repeated. "For the project, for the things they promised, for the schedule they bragged about at the diner." He clicked off the projector and pulled a bound ledger from the cabinet. His pen bled a neat signature on a fresh memo page. The page header read Collateral Review Preliminary Findings. "I need something from you," he said, sliding the memo across the desk. "A simple chain. Copy of the tow notice. Photo of the bulletin board. Photo of the meeting minutes with the time visible. Any voice acknowledgement from a board member." I thought of Carl under the bulletin frame hat pulled low. "I have a recording." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "Then you have the bridge." He opened my folder and placed the tow slip next to the memo. The green lamp painted everything a courtroom shade of serious. He stamped the corner once more, same red block as the folder. Received. 0317 appeared again, proof that the moment existed. "Why does this number matter so much?" I asked. "Besides the money," he rested his knuckles on the desk. "Contract law is a path of stones. You can wander a bit, but you cannot move the stones after you walk past them. They moved stones." I nodded. Title beats rumor. Hayes smiled for real this time. "Good line. Keep it exact." He crossed to a rolling drawer and pulled out a clear overlay marked with survey bearings. He clipped it to a light board and slid a transparent square over the church corner. 2 pins aligned the boundary pin I knew in my bones and the pin painted into the county plat. "See the alignment," he said. The tow was not only a moral mistake, it was a geographic one. The teller tapped the glass window from the hallway. "Mr. Hayes, you have a call." "Hold them," he said. He kept his eyes on the overlay. "If you present these into the record, I can file an internal hold by close of business, but you must stay clean. No shouting matches, no threats. The paper should do the work." "Paper outlives noise," I said. He nodded once. "Exactly." He typed a brief email with the memo attached, then paused. "One more thing. The board can try to amend minutes retroactively. That will not save them if your original copy is stamped and the time sequence is anchored." I got "received" €9.12 on the copy from the post office, I said. The clerk stamped it in front of me. "Good," he said. "Bring the clerk if you can. Clerks and arguments." Hayes signed at the bottom of the memo. Hayes, R. Morton, VP, Collateral Risk. The seal impression sounded like a soft punch on a heavy bag. He handed me the page with a second sheet beneath it, a formal note addressed to County Clerk's office. "This authorizes me to attend as a neutral party," he said. "I will not argue facts. I will read the clause." "Freeze happens only if it is public," I said. "If it is read into record," he said. "Numbers do not bluff. They do what they say." He turned off the lamp. The room dimmed to ordinary time. The hum of the vault returned steady as before. I folded the memo into my folder and felt the new weight settle against the toe slip. My hands were steady now. "See you at the hearing," Hayes said. "Count on it. Numbers don't lie. They testify." The HOA hall smelled like old coffee and floor wax. Fluorescent tubes buzzed above folding chairs set in nervous rows. A portable projector threw the meeting screen onto a wrinkled sheet. Bold text stamped across the first slide. "Minutes filed." Margaret adjusted the mic. The head of council sat to her right, a man with tidy hair and a tidy smile. Hayes was not in the room, but his memo rode in my folder like an engine with the key already turned. The clerk cleared her throat. "Board agenda. Item 1, parking compliance actions near the church." I stood. "Before we begin, I have a document for the record." Margaret gave a tight nod. "Submitted materials may be offered to the clerk." I walked the aisle. The chairs creaked. I laid Hayes's memo on the clerk's table and faced the board. Vice President Hayes Morton. Collateral risk, I said. This memo concerns Covenant Clause Section 1207. It explains that the clause is a loan condition and not a parking ordinance. It also explains sequence requirements. Minutes must precede enforcement. Counsel leaned toward his mic. Clerical nuance. The board followed policy. I looked at the projector. Then show the sequence. The clerk changed slides. Photos of the bulletin board. The tow slip marked Filed 0742. The county post stamp marked Received 0912. The last slide held a grainy still. A doorway camera title at the top edge read CAM 0315. I raised my hand. Please pause on that frame. The hall settled. A father lifted his kid into his lap. Somewhere a cell phone vibrated on wood. That camera is the hall entrance, I said. 3:15 means 3:15 in the morning. The envelope in the frame is today's minutes. The file stamp on your first slide states they were filed at 9:31. Yet here they are in the door at 3:15. Counsel smiled without blinking. Camera clocks drift. It is a clerical artifact. I nodded. Surveillance leaves timestamps. A few heads turned. Someone whispered, "He said it right." I pointed to the corner of the still. Lower right. The wall clock is mirrored in the glass. The second hand is at the 15 mark. Same minute as the camera label. That is not drift. That is alignment. Margaret leaned forward. Your tone is unhelpful. My tone is not the record I said. The record is the record. She flicked her eyes to counsel. He spoke into the mic with gentle authority. Even if timekeeping was imperfect, the board is within rights to enforce access lanes. The clause you cite is not determinative. It does not forbid decisive action. I opened the memo. The green bank seal caught the projector spill. Page 2. Breach ladder. If evidence is read into a public record that shows non-compliant sequence, the bank may freeze draws. The memo uses those words. May freeze draws. The mumble in the room sharpened. The clerk typed harder. The fluorescent buzz felt louder, like a hive turning. Margaret lifted a gavel. Order. I lifted the boundary photo from Chapter 1 and held it up. The bright pin glared like a warning flare. Access lane is a claim. The pin marks the lot line. Your tow treated church property like common area to improve a loan performance score. Counsel shifted. That is an interpretation. I placed the photo under the dock camera. The projector enlarged the pin and the curb. The red head of the pin was scuffed paint missing on one side where a chain had dragged. Boundary pin is now scarred, I said. That happened during the lift. You acted before any approval. Minutes were delivered to your door at 3:15. The tow was at 7:42. Your own file shows it. The room exhaled at once. Deacon Harris's chair scraped. Madam President, maybe we ought to table enforcement until the bank clarifies. Margaret tightened her grip on the gavel. We will not be bullied by theatrics. Counsel recommendation. Counsel smiled again. Demonstrate good governance. Increase penalties for willful noncompliance. Triple fee, tier signals control. Margaret raised her chin. Motion to triple compliance fees. A board member muttered, "Second." Discussion. I said, but the word barely left my mouth. A hand went up in the back. Carl. Madam President, if the bank is listening, more penalties may hurt renewal. She did not turn. All in favor. Hands rose, some high, some half-hearted. The fluorescent lights hummed like a strip of insects. I stepped forward. Enter this line into the record. Page 2. Third rung. Administrative freeze. I am reading Hayes's memo into the record now. The clause ties enforcement to draws. Non-compliant sequence triggers review. Counsel's smile thinned. The bank will not act on a single citizen's grievance. My phone screen glowed. The clerk looked up. Do you intend to submit audiovisual media for the record? Yes, I said. I have the camera still the tow slip, the county stamp, and audio from a board member stating that enforcement supports the loan. Carl sank lower in his seat. Counsel bristled. Out of context. I faced the clerk. Please print the title page with the bank seal and the sentence that begins collateral performance metric. Place the print beside the still that reads CAM 0315. Enter both as exhibits with the memo and the stamps. The clerk nodded, fingers moving. Printers in the corner barked to life. The pages slid out warm and official. Margaret hit the gavel. Fees are tripled. Meeting adjourned. Chairs scraped. People stood, but did not leave. The clerk stepped to the mic, voice tentative but clear. For the record, exhibits are marked and filed. I looked at the screen one last time. The still image held. The envelope glowed in that doorway pinch of light. The clock hand at 15. The label that refused to blink. Put that in the minutes I said. The fluorescent buzz dimmed in my ears as if the hall itself was listening. The mic clicked once, sharp as a pin. The county clerk lifted a rubber stamp and brought it down with a dry thud. Acknowledged. The word bloomed purple on the cover sheet beside the county seal. We sat on hard benches that had rounded 1,000 spines. The courthouse smelled like dust, lemon oil, and paper that had survived more storms than any of us. Hayes stood to my left, jacket, neat eyes steady. Grandpa sat 2 rows back, hat folded in his lap like a vow. Case item, the clerk said. Access enforcement near the church submitted by homeowner Dan Harrell and others. Parties present Harrell, I said. Whitfield Homeowners Association Council answered chin high. Margaret nodded beside him, lips folded like a closed envelope. The hearing officer looked over half-moon glasses. We're not a court. We take evidence and keep records. Speak plain. Leave heat at the door. Plain is all I've got, I said. He tipped his pen. Proceed. I stepped to the table, placed the folder down, and opened it so the seal faced the room. The green lamp cast a pool that made every crease look like relief lines on a map. Exhibit A, I said. Tow notice. Filed 0742, showing 1207. Exhibit B, the clerk said, stamping the corner. Acknowledged. Exhibit C, I said, sliding the bulletin photo. County log reference posted 0800. Acknowledged, the stamp answered. Exhibit D, I said. Meeting minutes received 0931. The clerk stamped again, the benchwood humming under my elbows. The hearing officer glanced at counsel. Sequence is obvious. Counsel leaned in. Our internal clocks are synchronized weekly. Drift is plausible. The board acted to ensure emergency access. Hayes cleared his throat, then spoke the way a surveyor draws a straight line. Hayes, Morton. Vice President Collateral. Risk Mountain Bank. With permission, I'll read a clause. The hearing officer nodded. The mic hissed lightly. Hayes laid a memo on the pad, its header bright as a stoplight. Hero 1207. Collateral performance metric. The bank conditions its revolving line of credit on documented compliant enforcement in common areas. Compliant here means minutes precede action notices are authentic and evidence is capable of audit. Counsel adjusted his tie. Clerical nuance remains clerical. Hayes looked at him without temperature. Clerical nuance ends when the ink is in the clerk's book. The hearing officer's pen scratched once. Go on. I slid the still frame onto the pad. The screen in back flickered and held doorway a mailer light slanting across linoleum. Top edge read KAM 0315. That's the hall camera, I said. The envelope is the day's minutes. They show filed 0931. This frame shows delivery 6 hours earlier. Counsel's smile had no humor left. We dispute the camera's reliability. Then rely on the wall clock, I said. Lower right reflected in the glass. Same minute. Same second hand. Surveillance leaves timestamps. The room breathed in. The hearing officer held that breath for us. Clerk? The clerk leaned to the mic. The wall clock in that hall is battery. I replaced it last month. It keeps time, noted the officer said. Hayes set a thin overlay on the desk. The projector threw survey lines across the wall like white wire. Church lot boundary, he said, tapping the bright dot where the boundary pin sits. The toe lift scarred the pin head itself. That pin marks private lot, not common area. Margaret spoke at last. We designated that lane as governed space. The board has the right to designate with law, Hayes said. Not with wish. The clerk stamped the overlay. Acknowledged. I reached into the folder and placed the audio certification form on top. Exhibit E, I said. Board member statement made at the bulletin board 2 days ago. Enforcement supports the loan. Recorded with date and time. The postal clerk can corroborate the received 0912 stamp on the same chain. The hearing officer rubbed the bridge of his nose. Counsel, I'm hearing a series of stones that don't sit flat. Counsel's voice tried for measured. We moved to strike the audio as out of context. Context arrives with the stamps, the officer said. We're making a record, not a commercial. The mic popped as I leaned in. I don't want anyone ruined. I want the record to stop being a weapon. Pressure isn't law. Hayes did not nod, but the corner of his mouth said agreement. He placed a final sheet on the pad, a document with the bank seal deep embossed. Notice of review collateral, Fearhard 12-07. Pursuant to the covenant, probable breach suspends draws pending audit. This is a courtesy copy. The bank will transmit to the board and the county within the hour. The stamp hit like a nail seat. Acknowledged. Counsel reached for the mic. This is outrageous. The community needs continuity. Interest rates. Interest, Hayes said, grows on paper. So does trust. Both require sequence. The hearing officer looked to the benches. People from the diner. The deacon. The postal clerk with his glasses. Even the tow driver hat in hand. A murmur lifted, then fell into a shared quiet. Our silent beat. Anything further, the officer asked. 2 points, I said. First, the tow order used a loan clause as if it were law. Second, minutes filed after action is not compliance, it's theater. Counsel stared at the memo as if staring could erase embossing. Clerical error. We will amend. Hayes slid one finger along the memo text. Amendments can fix typos. They cannot fix time. Margaret's voice thinned. We did what we had to do. Grandpa spoke from the bench, not loud, not soft. You did it during church. The officer capped his pen. The record holds. Bank's notice is in. County acknowledges receipt. This office doesn't order people, but it remembers them. Counsel swallowed. We will confer. The clerk gathered the exhibits and stacked them like bricks. The top page gleamed with the seal, the raised letters catching light. Hayes tucked his copy into a flat leather case and fastened it the snap, crisp as a period. At the door, the hearing officer paused. One more for the page, he said. Anything you want preserved in a single sentence. Mr. Harrell? I looked at Grandpa's hat, then at the purple word that kept appearing on our papers. Paper outlives noise. The clerk wrote it letter by letter, then stamped the line. Acknowledged. Counsel leaned towards his mic, voice turned to gravel. For clarity and only pending review, we are withdrawing an item. The officer tilted his head. State it. Counsel stared at the table when he said it. Listing withdrawn. Grandpa let out a breath that felt like 90 Sundays exhaled at once. The room did not cheer. It didn't need to. Stamps and seals had done the work. Hayes touched the leather case once like a mechanic checking torque. He looked at me and finally nodded. Finally, someone fought back. The postal clerk whispered behind me. The mic went dead with a last small click. The stamp hit the page hard enough to shake the desk. Order granted spread across the ledger in purple ink, clean and final. Hayes slipped the document from under the press. Effective immediately. Draws under 4-12-07 are frozen. The bank office hummed vault motor low printer head ticking. The air smelled of toner and brass polish. Under the green lamp, the embossed seal looked almost wet. You'll take this one, he said, sliding the folder toward me. You testified, I said. You should deliver it. He shook his head. Chain of custody. Your hand my authority. The teller peered over her partition. Need a courier? No. Hayes checked his watch. Locksmith's due at noon. We'll meet him there." Outside, the day felt too bright for what was coming. Grandpa waited in the truck thermos balanced between his palms. "You sure you want to see this?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Seen worse? Orders change locks, not tempers." I gave a short laugh. "That's one for the record." He nodded once the rhythm of men who built before they argued. We pulled into the HOA lot at 11:54. The locksmith's van idled by the curbside door, open boxes of cylinders lined like small coffins. Inside the office, fluorescent tubes buzzed above folding tables stacked with binders. Margaret stood behind the glass door counsel beside her treasurer behind them with a checkbook hugged to his chest. Hayes set his case on the hood and unlatched it. "Mrs. Whitfield, counsel treasurer." He handed over the top sheet. "Administrative freeze under Order 1207. Order granted." Counsel skimmed fast, jaw tightening. "Pending appeal, surely. Pending audit," Hayes corrected. "Appeal changes nothing." The treasurer cleared his throat. "Our payments clear Fridays, not until compliance," Hayes said. "That's the sequence." Margaret crossed her arms. "You can't change our locks." The locksmith raised both hands. "Ma'am, I just turn what's printed." He tapped the work order. "Access control, reset, 12:0. I placed the folder on the entry table. "Record copy, bank copy, HOA copy." The embossed seal caught light like an eye that never blinked. Counsel leaned forward. "Clerical error shouldn't freeze assets. When time is the error, Hayes said the ledger stops until it catches up." The wall clock struck 12 thin metallic. Our silent beat. The treasurer looked down at his checkbook. "What counts as compliance?" Hayes opened a blank repayment form. "Reverse the triple fee vote. Refund tow tier. Amend minutes with camera still attached as Exhibit A. Then file and notify the bank." Margaret's voice shook. "You are not the law." "No," Hayes said evenly. "I'm the lender. The law's in the stamps." I slid the deed and seal photo forward. The scar on the boundary pin shone like truth under the tube light. Counsel sighed. "We can sign a repayment plan without admitting fault." Hayes didn't blink. "The ledger cares about numbers, not confessions." The locksmith checked his watch. Exactly 12. Keys rattled. He set to work, face-neutral movements precise. Screws into a paper cup. Plate off. Cylinder turned. The sound was surgical. Margaret's fingers tightened on the table edge. Hayes spoke softly. "Keep the old keys as souvenirs. They open nothing now." The treasurer hesitated, then sighed. "If we sign, the freeze lifts. When the clerk files your amendments," Hayes said. "Not a minute before." He turned the form around. "Print name." The pen scratched. "Title, treasurer, date, today." Hayes pressed the seal. The metallic punch echoed in the office like a closing safe. He slid the carbon copies apart white for record blue for them. The locksmith tested the new cylinder twice. Click, smooth. He wrote the key code on a tag and sealed it in a small envelope. "Authorized signers only." The treasurer took it eyes down. "Reset complete," the locksmith said. He signed his work order and handed Hayes the carbon. "Bank acknowledges receipt," Hayes replied. We stepped into the sun. Heat rose off the asphalt, smelling of tar and relief. A boy on a bike slowed to watch the van, confused by the quiet ending. Margaret followed to the door. "You've humiliated this community." I rested a hand on the sealed packet. Embarrassment heals. Forgery doesn't. She looked away to the treasurer's pocket where the new keys hid. Hayes snapped his case shut. "Order served." Ledger noted. "Hold in effect." The treasurer spoke softly into his phone voice flat. "Accounts frozen until compliance." The door closed behind him with a click that sounded like balance returning. The projector cast its green glow over the church hall, humming in rhythm with the ceiling fan. On the screen, a single phrase blinked beneath the county seal, "Ledger credited." The benches filled again, neighbors in Sunday shirts, coffee cups on their knees, the same faces that had looked away the morning Grandpa's Buick was lifted. Now they looked forward. Hayes stood at the front table. Sleeves rolled tie loosened the bank's folder beside the microphone. Effective this morning, he said, refunds processed. Balances reconciled under Cardar 12-07. Compliance complete. His voice carried just enough to reach the back row the way order does when it no longer needs to shout. Margaret sat near the aisle, posture folded in on itself. Counsel sat beside her silent for the first time in weeks. The treasurer arranged envelopes across the table, each stamped credited in the upper corner. Rows of quiet reparations. Grandpa's hat rested on the lectern, its brim still dusty from the tow lot. The pastor adjusted the mic, unfolded a creased letter, and began to read in the same voice he used for scripture. To those who towed me while I prayed, he read, pausing on the commas like steps on a path. I forgive you. Community is not control. A neighborhood can have fences without enemies. The air inside thickened. No one shifted. Even the fluorescent hum dimmed beneath the words. A hand started clapping near the back, tentative testing. Then another. Soon, the hall filled with applause that wasn't loud so much as steady like rain on a tin roof. After 3 beats, silence fell again, sharp and deliberate as if everyone understood that justice sometimes speaks only in quiet. Hayes closed the folder. Ledger cleared, he said. Loan reinstated. Refunds verified. Accounts at 0 balance. Margaret stood halfway, fingers twisting the hem of her jacket. We followed the process, she whispered. Hayes looked at her not unkindly. You followed habit. Process starts when you read what you sign. I stood near the side wall watching light crawl along the boundary pin we'd reset by the church steps. The brass glinted like memory given weight. The pastor folded Grandpa's letter, laid it beside the hat. It's easy to write rules, he said. Harder to write forgiveness. The treasurer stepped to the podium, hands trembling around an envelope. Mr. Harrell, he said, this covers the fee and accrued interest. I took it, but I didn't open it. Keep the copy, I said. Refunds fix ledgers, not trust. He nodded. Minutes will post tonight with full ledger entries and corrections. Hayes stepped forward, tapping the folder once. Transparency's worth more than collateral. Keep it public. A voice from the back postal clerk in his blue shirt called out, Guess the stamps won again. Grandpa smiled from his bench. Paper never raised its voice. Laughter trickled through the rows. It wasn't the laugh of victory, but of pressure easing after too long. Margaret rose fully now. We made mistakes, she said. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. No one answered for a moment. That silence, honest and unforced, did more than words could. The pastor broke it gently. Apologies stand. Policy changes next. He turned to Hayes. The banks satisfied, Hayes opened his ledger under the green lamp. The seal shone like wax still cooling. Satisfied, he said. Ledger credited. Loan cleared. Community account solvent. The treasurer walked to the projector holding up a printed list of refunds. Each name followed by a check number and the word received. All filed with county acknowledgement. The deacon moved through the hall with a tray of coffee, same blend he served every Sunday, steam curling into the fluorescent light. The smell softened the paper and ink and seals, reminding everyone that peace is rarely grand. It's brewed, poured, and shared. Margaret took a cup, nodding toward me. You got your justice. Not mine, I said. Ours. Hayes slipped the folder shut. Audit closed. Compliance achieved. Title clear. Grandpa rose slowly, cane tapping the floor. Freedom isn't loud, he said. It's notarized. The room chuckled gently this time, the kind that settles instead of swells. Hayes looked at me. You think they'll remember? They will, I said. The paper will remind them. He smiled, small but certain. Justice sounds like refunds. The projector beeped. The display dimmed, message fading into gray. Ledger credited. Ghosted once more before vanishing. The pastor bowed his head. Let's leave this place lighter than we entered it. People rose, chairs folded. The sound of metal legs collapsing into stacks echoed through the hall like punctuation marks on a long overdue sentence. Outside, sunlight flashed against the boundary pin and the flag by the church door lifted once in the wind, a single motion that looked like thanks. Grandpa adjusted his coat and looked back at the hall. "Think it's over?" "For them, maybe," I said. "For us, it's balanced." He nodded. "Then that's enough." We stepped into the daylight, leaving behind the smell of coffee, the ink of forgiveness, and the ledger that finally matched what people had said all along, that community isn't about rules. It's about repair. The evening sun slanted through the maples, washing the church drive in bronze light. The new plaque gleamed beside Grandpa's Buick, freshly waxed and parked exactly where it had been towed weeks ago. The engraved line caught the glow like truth remembered, transfer order seal community restored. A small crowd gathered not for spectacle, but for peace. Folding chairs faced the podium, draped in white cloth. The county seal, stamped at the base of the stand, looked almost regal under the setting sun. The smell of warm asphalt and coffee drifted through the air. Hayes stood near the edge of the group, sleeves rolled tight, tucked, watching in quiet satisfaction. The pastor adjusted the microphone, its click echoing through the soft hum of dusk. Today, the pastor began. We mark the end of an argument and the beginning of a standard. He looked to Grandpa, who sat in the front row with his hat on his knee and the faintest smile in his eyes. He lifted a small envelope from the table. Inside, the transfer order seal glimmered red and gold. "This seal completes the ledger," he said. "It also releases the lien on both property and pride." Hayes nodded once. "Filed and honored." The pastor turned to me. "Would you do the unveiling?" I pulled the cloth away. The plaque shone clean and heavy in memory of fair process and second chances. Community is not control. The crowd murmured, some hands clapped softly. Others just folded together. Relief written in every gesture. Grandpa rose slowly. The light brushed the brim of his hat as he approached the Buick. Its chrome gleamed. The old key sat on a folded handkerchief atop the hood. Hayes stepped forward, voice measured. The order's complete vehicle, released title, clear. This one belongs back where it started. Grandpa picked up the key. The metal winked like a note held too long and a song finally ending. He turned it in his palm, studying the small stamped number at its base, aperture 1207. "That code started trouble," he said. "Now it just starts the car." Laughter rose gentle and grateful. The pastor placed a hand on Grandpa's shoulder. "Some lines get rewritten by how we respond." Grandpa looked toward the crowd, neighbors, board members, even Margaret standing apart near the drive gate, her hands clasped, head lowered but present. "I'm not angry anymore," he said, "but I'm not sorry for standing up either." Margaret lifted her chin. "You made us read our own rules." He nodded. Finally, someone fought back. A hush fell. Then a pulse of applause that spread like a wave through the chairs and along the church wall. Hayes folded his arms and let the moment breathe. I caught sight of the deed seal, framed beside the podium, same seal we'd argued over in the boardroom, now displayed under glass. Its edges no longer looked like weapons, only boundaries kept honest. The pastor stepped up again. "By the authority of the county and the consent of its citizens," he said, "we dedicate this drive to those who believe fairness can be enforced without anger." He gestured to the plaque. "May every notice be fair, every order filed, and every gate stay open." The crowd echoed the words, "Gate stays." The setting sun washed the pavement in amber. Grandpa started the Buick. The engine caught smooth as memory. A few claps followed the ignition, as if even the car deserved applause. Hayes smiled faintly. "Runs better without liens." "Runs cleaner," I said. Paper cleared the road. Grandpa rested his hand on the wheel but didn't drive yet. "Let them walk ahead first," he said. "I'll follow the light." We stepped aside. Families passed children tracing their fingers over the brass letters of the plaque. Someone snapped a photo. Margaret lingered by the gate, then turned back toward us. "I'll keep the minutes honest," she said. "That's all we ever wanted," I answered. The pastor closed his binder. "Then we're done here." The flag above the steeple lifted once in the evening breeze. Hayes tucked his folder under his arm. "Funny," he said, When you balance a ledger, it changes more than numbers. I looked at Grandpa, the car, and the plaque shining like a promise. Balance is louder than blame. He turned the key again, letting the engine idle. Justice sounds good, he said, smiling. But peace sounds better. He eased the Buick forward, stopping just before the plaque. The headlights touched the gate, now permanently open. The crowd stepped aside, leaving a clear lane through the sunset. "Drive open," the pastor called. Grandpa nodded, his voice steady. "Gate stays." The car rolled on sunlight, dancing along the hood, the seal flashing once. Transfer order seal, before dusk folded the drive in gold. The evening light still clung to the church drive, warm on the brass transfer order seal beside Grandpa's Buick. The plaque caught the last sun, its engraving steady as truth. Community is not control. People lingered after the ceremony, voices low, the smell of coffee mixing with dust and promise. I looked at the open gate and the posted order that ended months of noise, knowing fairness could be enforced without raising a hand. Finally, someone fought back. Justice isn't loud. It's steady. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.